Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is making a decision that will completely change their life. They don't know it yet. They think it's just another moment of anger, another wave of fear, another burst of joy. But that emotion, that single feeling coursing through their veins, is quietly writing the script of their future. Your emotions aren't just feelings you experience. They're the invisible puppet masters pulling the strings of every choice you make, every relationship you build, and every opportunity you either seize or let slip away. Tonight we're going to uncover the truth about how your emotional world is secretly designing your destiny, one feeling at a time. Welcome to Marjan Al-Nahlar. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your favorite topic you'd like us to explore next. Sarah thought she was being rational when she turned down the promotion. She had a list of logical reasons: longer hours, more responsibility, potential stress. But what she didn't realize was that her decision was actually made 3 seconds before her conscious mind even started analyzing the pros and cons. Deep in her brain, in a tiny almond-shaped region called the amygdala, fear had already cast its vote. This is the reality most of us live in without knowing it. We believe we're logical creatures who occasionally have emotions, but neuroscience reveals the opposite. We're emotional beings who sometimes think we're being logical. Every single day, your emotions are making thousands of micro-decisions that collectively shape the trajectory of your entire life. When you meet someone new and instantly feel drawn to them or put off by them, that's not intuition. That's your emotional brain processing millions of data points in milliseconds. When you choose one job over another, one partner over another, one path over another, you think you're weighing options carefully. But here's what's really happening. Your emotions are scanning each possibility against your deepest fears, desires, and unhealed wounds, then presenting you with what feels like a rational choice. The problem isn't that emotions make decisions. They're actually incredibly sophisticated information processing systems. The problem is that most people have never learned to understand the language their emotions are speaking, so they end up living lives designed by unconscious fears rather than conscious dreams. Think about the last major decision you made. Maybe it was where to live, who to date, or what career to pursue. Now ask yourself, what were you feeling in your body when you made that choice? Was there excitement, anxiety, relief, dread? Those physical sensations weren't just side effects of your decision. They were the actual decision-making process in action. Your emotions don't just influence your choices, they are your choices. And until you understand how this hidden architect in your mind operates, you'll keep wondering why your life doesn't match your intentions. Dr. Antonio Damasio, one of the world's leading neuroscientists, discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about decision-making. He studied patients who had suffered damage to the emotional centers of their brains, but retained all their logical thinking abilities. These patients could analyze problems perfectly, list pros and cons endlessly, but they couldn't make simple decisions like what to eat for lunch. Without emotions to guide them, they were paralyzed by infinite possibilities. This revealed a shocking truth. Emotions are not the enemy of good decisions. They're the foundation of all decisions. Your logical mind can process information, but your emotional mind determines what that information means to you. Every emotion carries data. Fear tells you about potential threats and helps you assess risk. Excitement reveals what energizes and motivates you. Anger shows you where your boundaries are being crossed. Sadness signals what matters to you and what you're grieving the loss of. Joy points toward what brings meaning and fulfillment to your life. But here's where it gets complicated. Most people's emotional guidance systems are severely corrupted by past experiences. If you grew up in an environment where it wasn't safe to trust your feelings, you might have learned to override your emotional signals. If you experience trauma, your fear response might be hypersensitive, seeing threats where none exist. If you were raised to believe certain emotions were bad or wrong, you might have developed elaborate strategies to avoid feeling them. This emotional conditioning doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you choose. A person who learned that love equals pain will unconsciously sabotage healthy relationships. Someone who associates success with danger will find ways to stay small. A person who equates happiness with selfishness will feel guilty every time life gets good. Your current life is a perfect reflection of your emotional programming. Look around you. The relationships you have, the work you do, the way you spend your time, the risks you take or avoid, all of it has been filtered through your emotional belief system. If you want to change your life, you can't just change your thoughts or your actions. You have to change your relationship with your emotions. Most people try to manage their emotions like they're managing unruly children, through control, suppression, or distraction. But emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're guidance systems to be understood. The key isn't to eliminate difficult emotions or manufacture positive ones. The key is to develop emotional literacy. Emotional literacy means learning to read the messages your feelings are sending without being overwhelmed by them. It means understanding that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. It means recognizing that you can feel afraid and still choose courage, feel sad and still find joy, feel angry and still act with love. When you start paying attention to your emotional patterns, you begin to see how they've been steering your life. Maybe you notice that you always feel anxious before good things happen, so you unconsciously sabotage opportunities. Maybe you realize that you feel guilty when you succeed, so you keep yourself playing small. Maybe you discover that you feel most alive when you're helping others, but you've been chasing career paths that leave you feeling empty. These insights are pure gold because they show you exactly where your destiny is being hijacked by unconscious emotional reactions. Once you can see the pattern, you can change it. But you can't change what you can't see, and you can't see what you're not willing to feel. The most successful, fulfilled people aren't those who have eliminated difficult emotions from their lives. They're those who have learned to work with their emotional guidance system instead of against it. They understand that emotions are messengers, not masters. They know how to extract the wisdom from every feeling without being controlled by it. Your emotions have been trying to guide you toward your authentic destiny all along. They've been showing you what truly matters to you, what energizes you, what depletes you, what excites you, and what terrifies you. But if you've been taught to ignore, judge, or override these signals, you've been navigating life without your most sophisticated guidance system. The question isn't whether your emotions control your destiny. They already do. The question is whether you're going to become conscious of this process so you can participate in creating the life you actually want. Marcus couldn't understand why he kept choosing partners who were emotionally unavailable. He was successful, intelligent, and genuinely wanted a loving relationship. Yet somehow, he was magnetically drawn to people who kept him at arm's length. What Marcus did not realize was that he was operating from an emotional blueprint written when he was 7 years old, watching his mother chase after his father's approval while his father remained perpetually distant. This is your emotional inheritance, the unconscious patterns passed down through generations like invisible heirlooms. Long before you could think critically about relationships, success, money, or happiness, your young brain was absorbing the emotional climate of your early environment and using it to create a template for how the world works. Your parents didn't just teach you with their words, they taught you with their fears, their joys, their conflicts, and their silences. If your mother felt guilty every time she did something for herself, you absorbed the belief that self-care equals selfishness. If your father worked constantly to avoid dealing with emotional pain, you learned that busyness is how you handle difficult feelings. If your family celebrated achievements but ignored emotional needs, you develop the conviction that love is earned through performance. These aren't conscious beliefs you can simply think your way out of. They're stored in your nervous system as emotional memories that trigger automatic responses. When you encounter situations that remind your unconscious mind of these early patterns, your body reacts as if you're still that child trying to navigate an unpredictable world. The cruel irony is that we often recreate the very dynamics we swore we'd avoid. The woman who vowed never to be like her controlling mother finds herself micromanaging everyone around her. The man who promised he'd never be absent like his father becomes a workaholic who emotionally abandons his own children. The person who grew up with financial insecurity either hoards money obsessively or sabotages every opportunity for financial stability. This isn't failure or weakness. This is how human beings are wired. Your brain is designed to repeat familiar patterns because familiar feels safe, even when familiar is painful. Your emotional inheritance is playing out in your relationships, your career choices, your relationship with money, your ability to receive love, and your willingness to take risks. The most damaging part of emotional inheritance isn't the patterns themselves. It's the unconsciousness around them. When you're unaware that you're operating from childhood programming, you think your automatic reactions are just who you are. You believe your chronic anxiety is just your personality, your difficulty trusting others is just being realistic, or your need to please everyone is just being nice. But these are not character traits. They're survival strategies that once served a purpose, but now limit your potential. The hypervigilance that kept you safe in an unpredictable household now prevents you from relaxing into love. The people-pleasing that earned you attention in a chaotic family now keeps you from expressing your authentic needs. The emotional numbness that protected you from overwhelming pain now blocks you from experiencing joy. Lisa grew up in a house where anger was dangerous. When her father got angry, dishes flew and doors slammed. So Lisa learned to become invisible whenever conflict arose. 30 years later, she still shuts down at the first sign of disagreement, even in healthy relationships. She's not choosing this response. Her nervous system is automatically activating the same protective pattern that kept her safe as a child. The invisible chains of emotional inheritance bind us to repeat cycles of suffering across generations. Trauma doesn't just affect the person who experiences it. It gets passed down through modeling, through the emotional atmosphere of the home, and even through epigenetic changes that affect how genes are expressed. The grandmother who never processed her grief raises a daughter who's afraid of deep feeling, who then raises a son who mistakes emotional numbness for strength. But here's the hope hidden in this seeming hopelessness. Once you become aware of your emotional inheritance, you gain the power to choose differently. Consciousness is the key that unlocks these invisible chains. When you can see the patterns, you can interrupt them. When you can feel the old programming activating, you can choose a new response. The work isn't to judge or eliminate these patterns. They were brilliant adaptations to impossible circumstances. The work is to honor what these strategies gave you while choosing what serves you now. You get to decide which parts of your emotional inheritance you want to keep and which parts you're ready to transform. Breaking free from limiting emotional inheritance requires both compassion and courage. Compassion because you have to feel the pain that these patterns were originally designed to avoid. Courage because you have to step into the unknown territory of new ways of being. The first step is recognition. Start noticing when you have strong emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to the current situation. That's usually your emotional inheritance speaking. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself about why you can't have what you want. Those stories often contain clues about your inherited limiting beliefs. Notice the patterns in your relationships. Do you always attract the same type of person? Do you play the same role in every dynamic? Do you have the same conflicts over and over? These repetitions aren't coincidence. They're your unconscious mind trying to resolve old emotional wounds by recreating familiar scenarios. The second step is feeling without fixing. Instead of immediately trying to change your emotional reactions, get curious about them. What does this feeling remind you of? When did you first learn to respond this way? What was your child self trying to accomplish with this strategy? Approach your patterns with the same kindness you'd show a friend who's struggling. The third step is conscious choice. Once you can feel an old pattern activating, you have a moment of power. In that space between trigger and reaction, you can ask, how do I want to respond from who I am now, not who I was then? This isn't about forcing yourself to feel different. It's about choosing actions that align with your current values rather than your past fears. Remember, you're not just healing yourself when you break these patterns. You're healing your lineage. Every time you choose love over fear, connection over protection, growth over safety, you're changing the emotional inheritance you'll pass on to the next generation. You become the ancestor your descendants will thank. Your emotional inheritance doesn't have to be your destiny. It can become your wisdom. The very experiences that wounded you can become the source of your greatest strength and compassion, but only if you're willing to face them consciously and transform them with love. Every morning at 6 a.m., Jennifer's body floods with cortisol before her alarm even goes off. She's been waking up anxious for so long that her brain has learned to anticipate stress and prepare for it. She doesn't realize it, but her habitual worry isn't just affecting her mood. It's literally rewiring her brain and reshaping her reality. This is the chemistry of destiny in action. Every emotion you feel regularly becomes a neural pathway. Every thought you think repeatedly becomes a mental highway. Every feeling you suppress or express changes the very structure of your brain. You're not just experiencing emotions, you're manufacturing them, and in the process, you're creating the biochemical foundation of your future. When you feel fear, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals don't just affect you in the moment. They influence which thoughts your brain considers important, which memories it stores, and which possibilities it can even perceive. A person living in chronic fear literally cannot see opportunities that are invisible to someone in a state of chronic gratitude or excitement. Dr. Joe Dispenza's research shows that emotions are chemical feedback from experiences. But here's where it gets mind-bending. Your brain can't tell the difference between something you're actually experiencing and something you're vividly remembering or imagining. When you replay past hurts or rehearse future worries, you're creating the same chemical state as if those events were happening right now. This means that someone who spends their days replaying rejection is bathing their brain in the same chemicals produced by actual rejection. Their brain adapts to this chemical environment by becoming more sensitive to signs of rejection and less able to recognize acceptance. Without realizing it, they've trained their nervous system to look for and create more experiences of being rejected. The opposite is also true. A person who regularly practices gratitude literally changes their brain structure to become more sensitive to positive experiences. They begin to notice opportunities, connections, and possibilities that were always there, but previously invisible to their chemically conditioned perception. Your habitual emotional states do not just influence your choices, they determine what choices you can even see. You're not living in objective reality, you're living in the reality your chemistry creates. The most powerful example of how emotions become reality is in the realm of self-fulfilling prophecies. When you believe something deeply enough to feel it consistently, you unconsciously behave in ways that make it true. Your body language, your energy, your choices, and even your words all align to create evidence for whatever you're emotionally convinced is real. Take confidence, for example. Someone who feels genuinely confident doesn't just think different thoughts. They carry themselves differently. They make eye contact. They speak with certainty. They take up space. Other people unconsciously respond to these signals by treating them with more respect and offering more opportunities. The confident person's inner chemistry created an outer reality that reinforced their confidence. The same process works with limiting beliefs. Someone who feels fundamentally unworthy will unconsciously engage in self-sabotaging behaviors. They might arrive late to important meetings, undersell their achievements, or choose partners who don't value them. Their unworthiness chemistry creates behaviors that generate evidence of their unworthiness, which then reinforces the original feeling. This isn't positive thinking or wishful manifestation. This is basic neuroscience. Your emotions influence your posture, your facial expressions, your tone of voice, and your energy field. Other people are constantly reading and responding to these signals, usually without conscious awareness. You're in a constant dance of biochemical communication that shapes every interaction. But perhaps the most profound way emotions create reality is through attention. What you feel determines what you notice. A person in love sees beauty everywhere. A person in depression sees evidence of futility. A person in anger sees injustice and threat. Each emotional state acts like a filter that highlights certain aspects of reality while making others disappear. This selective attention then shapes your memory. You remember experiences that confirm your emotional state and forget or minimize those that contradict it. Over time, you build a library of memories that supports your habitual chemistry, creating an increasingly narrow version of reality. The scary part is how unconscious this process is. Most people have no idea their emotional habits are literally constructing their life experience. They think reality is something that happens to them, not something they're actively creating through their internal chemistry. The good news about the chemistry of destiny is that it's completely changeable. Your brain remains plastic throughout your entire life. which means you can literally rewire yourself for different experiences. But this requires understanding how to work with your biochemistry rather than against it. The key is consistency over intensity. One day of positive thinking won't rewire decades of negative conditioning, but 15 minutes of genuine gratitude practice every day for 3 months will create measurable changes in your brain structure. Small, consistent shifts in your emotional chemistry compound over time to create massive changes in your life experience. The most effective way to change your chemistry is through embodied practices that engage both your mind and body. Meditation, breathwork, movement, and even specific types of music can shift your neurochemical state within minutes. But the magic happens when you combine these state-changing practices with new behaviors that reinforce the new chemistry. If you want to rewire for confidence, you need to practice feeling confident and take actions from that confident state. If you want to change your relationship patterns, you need to cultivate the emotional state of someone who has healthy relationships and practice new relationship behaviors from that state. This is why affirmations alone often fail. Saying, "I am confident," while feeling insecure creates internal conflict that your nervous system rejects. But if you first shift into a confident state through breathing, posture, or movement, then speak your affirmations from that embodied experience, you're training your system to recognize confidence as familiar and safe. The most important thing to understand is that you have far more control over your chemistry than you've been taught to believe. You're not a victim of your emotions. You're the creator of them. Every time you choose to shift your state rather than stay stuck in old patterns, you're literally rewiring your brain for a different destiny. Your emotions aren't just internal experiences, they're the raw materials of your reality. When you change your chemistry, you change your perception. When you change your perception, you change your choices. When you change your choices, you change your life. This is how feelings become destiny and why mastering your emotional chemistry is the most practical thing you can do. Rachel had always been told she was too sensitive. Throughout her childhood, adults dismissed her emotional responses as overreactions. So she learned to ignore the knot in her stomach when something felt wrong, to push through the exhaustion that came from being around certain people, and to silence the excitement that bubbled up when she encountered something that truly inspired her. By 35, Rachel was successful on paper but miserable in reality. She had a prestigious job that drained her, a relationship that felt more like a business partnership than a romance, and a general sense that she was living someone else's life. What she didn't understand was that she had systematically disconnected from the most sophisticated guidance system she possessed, her emotional compass. Your emotions aren't random reactions to life events. They're intelligent responses carrying specific information about your environment, your relationships, and your alignment with your authentic self. But most people have never learned to distinguish between reactive emotions and navigational emotions. Reactive emotions are responses to external triggers. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you feel angry. You get criticized and you feel hurt. You face a deadline and you feel stressed. These emotions are valid and human, but they're primarily about what's happening to you in the moment. Navigational emotions are different. They're signals from your deeper wisdom about what's right or wrong for your life path. The sense of expansion you feel when you're around certain people versus the contraction you feel around others. The aliveness that comes when you're engaged in meaningful work versus the deadness that creeps in when you're just going through the motions. The peace that settles over you when you're in the right place at the right time versus the agitation that warns you something is off. Most people miss these navigational signals because they've been taught that emotions are problems to manage rather than information to interpret. They medicate anxiety instead of asking what it's trying to protect them from. They push through exhaustion instead of recognizing it as a sign they're pouring energy into the wrong places. They ignore excitement because they've learned that wanting things leads to disappointment. But your emotions are constantly scanning your environment and your choices, providing real-time feedback about what serves your highest good and what doesn't. Learning to read your emotional compass requires developing a new relationship with discomfort. Most people have been conditioned to avoid or escape difficult emotions as quickly as possible. But many of your most important navigational signals come disguised as discomfort. That anxiety you feel before social events might not be social anxiety. It might be your system recognizing that you're not being authentic in those relationships. The restlessness that appears when you're supposed to be relaxing might not be an inability to rest. It might be your soul's way of saying you're not living in alignment with your purpose. The sadness that seems to come from nowhere might not be depression. It might be grief for the life you are not living. Your body is constantly communicating with you through sensation. The tightness in your chest when someone lies to you, the warmth that spreads through your system when you're appreciated, the heavy feeling that settles in your stomach when you're about to make a decision that goes against your values, the lightness that lifts your spirit when you're moving in the right direction. These aren't just biochemical reactions. They're messages. Your nervous system is more sophisticated than any lie detector, more accurate than any personality test, more intuitive than any advisor. It knows things your logical mind hasn't figured out yet. It can sense people's authentic energy beneath their social masks. It can detect opportunities disguised as challenges and recognize threats dressed up as appealing offers. But accessing this guidance requires slowing down enough to feel. In a culture that rewards constant action and immediate responses, most people live in a state of chronic disconnection from their internal signals. They make decisions from their heads, wonder why nothing feels fulfilling, then make more decisions from their heads in an endless cycle of intellectual problem-solving that never addresses the actual problem. The actual problem isn't that you don't know what to do. It's that you're not listening to what you already know. Your emotional compass has been trying to guide you all along, but you've been taught to navigate by external maps rather than internal knowing. Developing trust in your emotional compass is a practice, not a destination. It requires learning to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom, between the pull of old patterns and the call of new possibilities. Fear-based emotions often feel urgent and create tunnel vision. They demand immediate action to avoid imagined catastrophes. They're repetitive, circular, and rarely lead to clarity. Wisdom-based emotions, on the other hand, often feel quieter but more certain. They expand your perspective rather than narrowing it. They don't demand immediate action. They simply inform you about what's true. Here's how to begin working with your emotional compass. Start paying attention to your energy levels throughout the day. Notice which activities, conversations, and environments energize you, and which ones drain you. Your life force is constantly giving you feedback about what's aligned and what isn't. Begin tracking your physical sensations when you're making decisions. Before you analyze the pros and cons, tune into your body. Does this choice create expansion or contraction? Excitement or dread? Lightness or heaviness? Your body often knows the right answer before your mind has even framed the question. Practice the pause between feeling and reacting. When strong emotions arise, instead of immediately trying to fix, avoid, or act on them, get curious. What is this feeling trying to tell you? What need is it pointing toward? What boundary is it trying to establish? What direction is it trying to guide you in? Most importantly, start small. Use your emotional compass for low-stakes decisions first. Which coffee shop feels right today? Which route home would be most nourishing? Which friend do you feel called to reach out to? As you build trust in your ability to read and follow your internal signals in small matters, you'll develop confidence to apply this guidance to bigger life choices. Your emotional compass isn't trying to make your life more complicated. It's trying to make it more authentic. It's not trying to create drama. It's trying to create alignment. Every feeling you have is information. Every sensation in your body is feedback. Every emotional response is guidance toward becoming more fully yourself. The question isn't whether you can trust your emotions. It's whether you're brave enough to listen to what they're telling you. David used to be a prisoner of his anger. Road rage, workplace conflicts, relationship explosions. His temper controlled his life and cost him opportunities, friendships, and peace of mind. But David's transformation didn't come from suppressing his anger or pretending it didn't exist. It came from understanding what his anger was really trying to tell him. Underneath David's rage was a deep sense of powerlessness that traced back to childhood experiences of being dismissed and invalidated. His anger wasn't the problem. It was his ally, trying to protect his sense of dignity and worth. Once David learned to decode this message and address the underlying wound, His anger transformed from a destructive force into powerful fuel for positive change. This is the essence of conscious creation, learning to work with your emotions as creative partners rather than fighting against them as enemies. Most people spend their lives either controlled by their emotions or trying to control their emotions. But there's a third option: collaborating with your emotions to consciously create the life you want. Conscious creation begins with accepting what is. You can't transform what you won't acknowledge, and you can't heal what you keep pushing away. This doesn't mean you have to like or agree with your current emotional patterns, but you do have to stop making them wrong. Every emotion you have, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient, contains wisdom about what you need, what you value, and what you're being called to change. The next step is understanding the difference between feeling your emotions and being your emotions. When you say, "I am angry," you're identifying with the emotion as if it defines you. When you say, "I am feeling angry," you're acknowledging the emotion as temporary information passing through your system. This subtle shift in language reflects a profound shift in relationship, from being controlled by emotions to being informed by them. Conscious creators don't try to eliminate difficult emotions. They learn to extract the wisdom from them. They understand that anxiety often contains important information about preparation or boundaries. Depression frequently signals that something in their life needs to change. Loneliness points toward their need for authentic connection. Each emotion is a messenger carrying intelligence about how to create a more fulfilling life. The most powerful tool for emotional transformation is what psychologists call response flexibility, the ability to pause between trigger and reaction and consciously choose how to respond. This pause doesn't have to be long. Even a 3-second gap between feeling something and acting on it can completely change the trajectory of your life. In that pause lives your power to rewrite your emotional story. Instead of automatically reacting from old patterns, you can ask yourself, what would love do here? What would courage choose? How would I respond if I truly believed I deserved the life I want? These questions shift you from reactive mode to creative mode. Response flexibility requires practice. Start with small irritations and minor disappointments. When someone cuts in line or your favorite restaurant is closed, notice your automatic emotional response and practice choosing a different reaction. Maybe you choose curiosity instead of irritation. Maybe you choose acceptance instead of frustration. These micro practices build your emotional fitness for handling bigger challenges. Another essential skill is learning to stay present with intense emotions without getting swept away by them. Emotions are energy in motion. They naturally rise, peak, and fall if you don't interfere with the process. But most people either suppress emotions, which traps the energy in their system, or amplify them through mental storytelling, which extends their duration and intensity. The middle path is to feel emotions fully while staying grounded in your body. Breathe deeply, relax your muscles, and let the emotion move through you like weather moving through the sky. Remember that no emotion is permanent, no matter how overwhelming it feels in the moment. As you develop these skills, you'll notice something remarkable happening. The emotions that used to derail you become sources of power and information. The sensitivity that once felt like a curse becomes a superpower that helps you navigate relationships and opportunities with unprecedented clarity. The intensity that used to overwhelm you becomes passion that fuels your creative projects and meaningful goals. You're not trying to become emotionless. You're learning to become emotionally intelligent. You're not eliminating your humanity. You're becoming more consciously human. This is how you transform from being at the mercy of your emotions to being the conscious creator of your emotional experience. The ultimate goal of emotional mastery is not to control your feelings. It's to align your emotions with your highest vision for your life. This happens when you stop seeing emotions as problems to solve and start seeing them as creative forces to channel. Every emotion contains creative potential. Anger can become passion for justice or fuel for necessary change. Sadness can deepen your compassion and strengthen your connection to what truly matters. Fear can sharpen your awareness and motivate you to develop new skills. Joy can expand your generosity and inspire others to reach for their own happiness. The practice of emotional alchemy involves consciously transforming lower-frequency emotional states into higher-frequency ones. This isn't about pretending negative emotions don't exist or forcing yourself to feel positive. It's about finding the gifts hidden within challenging emotions and using them as stepping stones to greater wisdom and effectiveness. For example, instead of being consumed by jealousy, you can use it as information about what you desire and let it motivate you to create those things in your own life. Instead of drowning in shame, you can let it teach you about your values and inspire you to make amends or different choices going forward. Instead of being paralyzed by overwhelm, you can use it as a signal to slow down, prioritize, and ask for support. The most successful people aren't those who never feel difficult emotions. They're those who have learned to transform difficult emotions into fuel for achievement and contribution. They've discovered that emotional intensity, when properly channeled, becomes their greatest asset rather than their biggest liability. As you master this practice, something beautiful happens. You stop being afraid of your own emotional depths because you know you can navigate them skillfully. You become more willing to take risks, love deeply, and pursue meaningful goals because you trust your ability to handle whatever feelings arise. Your emotions become allies in creating the life you truly want, rather than obstacles preventing you from having it. This is your birthright. Not to be emotionless, but to be emotionally empowered. Not to avoid feelings, but to transform them into the raw materials of your most authentic and fulfilling life. Your emotions have been trying to guide you toward your destiny all along. Now you have the tools to follow their wisdom consciously and skillfully. We began this journey with a simple truth. Your emotions control your destiny. But now you understand that this is not something happening to you. It's something you can participate in consciously and skillfully. Your emotions have never been the problem. The problem has been the lack of education about how to work with them as the sophisticated guidance system they actually are. Every feeling you've ever had has been trying to point you toward something important, toward what you need, what you value, what you're called to create, or what needs to heal. The person staring in that mirror at 3 a.m. that we met at the beginning of this story doesn't have to remain a victim of overwhelming emotions. They can become the conscious creator of their emotional experience and, through that transformation, the architect of their destiny. Remember, this isn't about achieving some impossible standard of emotional perfection. It's about developing a more conscious, compassionate, and skillful relationship with the full spectrum of human feeling. It's about understanding that your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's your superpower. Take a moment and think about one area of your life where you feel stuck or dissatisfied. Maybe it's your relationships, your career, your health, or your sense of purpose. Now ask yourself, what emotions come up when you think about this area of your life? Don't judge what you find. Don't try to fix it or change it. Just get curious. What is this emotion trying to tell you? What need is it pointing toward? What boundary is it trying to establish? What direction is it trying to guide you in? This simple practice of emotional curiosity is the beginning of everything. When you start listening to your emotions as messengers rather than dismissing them as problems, you begin to access the most sophisticated guidance system you possess. Your emotions have been writing the story of your life, whether you've been conscious of it or not. But now you have the awareness and tools to participate in that process consciously. You get to decide what story your emotions will help you create from this moment forward. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear about your experience. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when following your emotional guidance led you in the right direction, or share which emotional pattern you're ready to transform. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you found value in this exploration, hit that subscribe button and let me know what topic you'd like us to explore next. Are you curious about breaking generational patterns? Want to understand how to navigate difficult relationships? Interested in discovering your life purpose? Comment below with your favorite topic. Your suggestion might become our next deep conversation. Remember, you're not broken and your emotions aren't your enemy. You're simply a human being learning to work with the most sophisticated guidance system ever created, your own emotional wisdom. Trust the process, trust yourself, and trust that your feelings are always trying to guide you home to who you really are. Until next time, keep listening to the wisdom your soul sends through your emotions. Your destiny is waiting for you to hear its voice.